The Cabal of Tsakata, Episode 6. Augustine 12th, 5:13. I'm afraid I have become quite a recluse in the prolonged wait period before the next excursion. I am burdened by the guilt of making my dear friend Samira uncomfortable, with wanting more than what she was willing to give. I haven't seen anyone, and I have paid our innkeeper to bring me meals. He is very understanding, and he always gets me good food. I keep replaying the last few weeks and months in my mind's eye, trying to figure out what I did wrong or identify how I misread the signals. I can't wait to leave Bubesh, so I can alleviate both Samira and I from the awkwardness of this situation I created. Augustine 13th, 5:13. Sometimes the world can be a beautiful place, and I was reminded of that today. Samira came to see me today. When I opened the door and I saw her standing there, I felt several pieces inside me crack. I tried to say something, but I couldn't exactly find the words. What words did I even want to say? Well, I wanted to apologize, to tell her that I cared for her and that she was special to me. All I did was gape at her with wet eyes. She asked if she could come in, and I happily allowed her to do so. Samira sat on my bed, and I sat in the office desk chair, looking at her. For a long moment, neither of us said anything, and we kept avoiding eye contact. I finally found my voice, and I said I was sorry. She regarded me curiously and asked me what I was apologizing for. I told her I wasn't sure what I did to make her upset, but I was sorry, and that I cared for her. I told her I never wanted to make her uncomfortable, and if I pushed her into the kiss, I didn't mean to. She held up a hand and gave me a small smile, albeit with weepy eyes. She told me I did nothing wrong, and that she cared very much for me. The issue was with her alone. She drew in a deep breath and told me a truth about herself. She was originally born a man. Samira explained in the Naquerian language there was a term for people like her, and when translated it meant transgendered. Well, such an existence was known in ancient times, and thus there were potions, medicine, and other such things that could boost a person's masculine or feminine features in either genders. Samira knew as a child she was born in the wrong body, and luckily for her, she had parents who were liberal enough to embrace their child's identity. Many other children like Samira were not so fortunate. She told me after we kissed, she panicked, because she knew she was developing feelings for me, but she didn't know how I would react to her origins. Even though she is a woman, she still has her male genitalia. Tears started to trail down her cheek. I moved across the room and wiped them away. When she looked up at me, I smiled. I said to her I didn't care what was between her legs. I care about her as a person. I cared about her mind and her soul. I told her that it didn't matter how she was born, that I accepted her as the gender she chose for herself, and the person she wanted to be. I told her I still cared about her deeply, that I wanted to kiss her again, and that if she would have me, I would become a lover of hers. Samira smiled at me, and then removed her headscarf. Her beautiful hair cascaded around her shoulders, and then she bit her lower lip coyly. I took a deep breath and removed mine as well. She stared at my hair, which perhaps needed a cut, and she asked if she could run her fingers through it. I nodded, and she got incredibly close to me, with her chest touching my own. I felt her hot breath on my neck. Samira smiled broader, and then dipped her left fingertips into my hair. Her fingertips scraped against my scalp, and I closed my eyes as a mountain of pleasure slammed into me. I shuddered, and she giggled, digging a little harder and letting her right hand join in on the fun. I leaned against her and wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her ever closer. Whenever she breathed in, I felt her body react. My senses tingled, and I kissed the nape of her neck. I felt her legs push my knees open so she could nestle into me. Samira stopped playing with my hair, and she bent down so her lips were at my ear. She asked me if I were serious about me becoming her lover. I kissed her softly on the cheek, and then planted my forehead against her own. Our eyes gazed into one another. I whispered yes. While I was inexperienced with being a lover to anyone really, I would be willing to do anything to make her feel appreciated, loved, and adored. I let out a chuckle and added that I would be willing to do anything and everything on the walls at the temple found at Ornak, if she wanted. However, I also expressed I am willing to wait until she were comfortable and ready, with no pressure at all. She hugged me tightly and told me she would be more comfortable to do those things with me eventually. But for now, she just needed time. We kissed and spent the whole night cuddling with one another on the bed. I'm writing this entry now, but she is fast asleep in my bed. I plan to join her within moments. I have never known such happiness, and I hope I can always make her feel supported, safe, and loved. August 14th, 5:13. I've been spending considerable time with Samira, and we actually had some conversation about the temple locations. The first one is near the modern-day city of Rocklola, although it's not clear how far away it is exactly. Rocklola in ancient times was quite far from the capital and from a lot of the stronger Tagunite communities. In fact, Samira told me that the first temple that had fallen to Shali Shababa had been the one closest to the royal capital. Samira also showed me on the map where the crusades against the Cabal went, and traced each temple raid. All of the information was documented in ancient records of Tagunite scholars. I asked her whether or not there was ever a point when the Tagunite religion was alongside the Cabal of Tsakata, and Samira shared something quite interesting. Some scholars believe the Cabal of Tsakata predated the Order of Tagun. As she and I were discussing the maps and historical context related to the clash between the Order and the Cabal, Dr. Reaver and Dr. El Assad came upon our meeting. They told us that Dr. Reaver got permission to find the Temple of Tsakata at the lost site of Lorbesh, and to be ready to leave Bubesh. Director El Assad asked Samira if she wanted to join the expedition, and Dr. Reaver said Samira would be a welcomed addition. To my great satisfaction, Samira said yes. We'll be leaving in 3 days. August 16th, 5:13. We are leaving Bubesh tomorrow. However, there is something I wanted to write about today. Samira and I decided to spend the last day we would have alone together at her house. We made love over and over, and while there were many things neither of us had done before, we were both willing and eager to please and pleasure one another. She's sleeping right now, and I'm going to join her. Tomorrow we head for the distant city of Rocklola. August 17th, 5:13. We left Bubesh today, and this will be a long journey to the city of Rocklola. According to Hamal, it will take over 2 weeks of travel, and we will be stopping at various oases, merchant stops, and other such places along the way. In terms of travel, it is I, Samira, Carol, Obasi, Dr. Reaver, Hamal, Isco, 25 armed security personnel, 20 laborers, and other such support staff. It's slow going for sure. Samira, Obasi, Carol, and I sat around the campfire, and we had lovely conversation about one another's lives. Samira didn't tell them about the secret she told me, but discussed what it was like growing up in Naquer. Obasi explained that his parents relocated to Ocean Dare, as Obasi's mother was a great warrior who trained the Oceandarian military. Carol's family was actually originally from Skandar, from a place called Damoska. I explained that my family was from an old Oceandarian lineage, and that I had a little sister, 4 years younger than I. Obasi asked Samira if I and her were lovers, and I perhaps too eagerly said yes. Samira and Carol laughed. Carol commented how cute a couple we were. It was a nice compliment. Obasi spoke of his love for Norris, and we all gave the dearly missed man a toast of honor. Samira and I shared a tent, and when it was just us, Samira removed her headscarf. I did the same, and I'll be honest, I love Samira's hair. Seeing it symbolizes her trust in me, how she allows herself to be vulnerable around me, and how she allows me to see something quite special. She has admitted to loving my hair too. Every time we kiss or make love, I fall deeper in love with her. Out of respect for everyone else, she and I didn't make love in the tent. I'm so glad I came to Naquer. Augustine 25th, 5:13. A great sandstorm hit the area, so we hunkered down in our tents. Luckily, our tents are withstanding the storm. Within the sand-filled winds, it's just Samira and I, isolated from the outside world. The wind is fairly loud outside, so Samira and I took advantage. I have never made love 3 times in a sandstorm before. It was quite an exciting experience. Ever since we first started our love-making relationship, I have expressed to her after each session how beautiful she is and how marvelous her body is. I express how much I adore her through sweet words and soft touches. She makes me so happy. September 4th, 5:13. We finally reached the city of Rocklola about midday. Rocklola is a desert city near a large oasis, and based on information from ISCO, it draws its water from an underground river. There are numerous wells for the people in the city. In Naquer, the desert loops around the country like a crescent moon, with more lush areas being in the mountainous areas. Rocklola is one of the ancient Saushi Adamite cities that served as resting areas for traveling caravans. As we made our way to the city, I saw its scope and size. It was perhaps a fourth the size of Bubesh, with lots of shepherds and hunters who care for the city. Dr. Reaver said that we will rest in the city while we plan our excursion into the desert. After all, we don't know exactly where Lorbesh is, or where it used to be. We managed to secure rooms at one of the inns. In fact, all of the inns were booked, by the way, which made the local business owners very happy. Tomorrow, we will gather any information we can. Samira and I shared a room. September 5th, 5:13. Dr. Reaver had Samira, Obasi, Carol, and I take different sections of the city. Dr. Reaver and Samira went to talk to the governor of the city, while Obasi went to the town's records and library. Carol went to speak to the religious officials at the Temple of Tagun. I was left with talking to any of the townsfolk who might speak the common tongue. I started with trying to talk to some of the merchants in the city, but they were uninterested in anything not related to their wares. I asked some of the town's guards, but they told me much the same. They only concerned themselves with protecting the city, and no one knew of any ruin near the city. There was a caravan leader in town, although she mostly traveled from the northeastern parts of the country to the capital and back. She has never seen any ruins, or anything of the like. That made sense, as the Cabal of Tsakata was quite reclusive, and they concealed their temples from the majority of Saushi Adamite attention. A sudden thought occurred to me, and I approached the shepherds. As shepherds wandered the lands, going from place to place, they might know something. I asked a couple of younger shepherds if they were familiar with any ruins or places to water their sheep that were secret. They were quite resistant to my questioning and told me there weren't any such places. I approached an older shepherd, and he was even more resistant to speak with me. As I walked over to approach a third shepherd, a large group of men and women surrounded me, all shepherds I assumed. They were quite aggressive about asking me why I was asking so many questions. I told them I was working with the archaeology excavation team, and we were looking for a kind of ruin. At first, they didn't believe me, but then I started to show them my art book. They were all enthralled, and a couple of them knew some very old legends about a demon seductress. I had to warn them about the more graphic pictures, and the shepherds were quite taken aback. Still, they were not familiar with any temples like the one at Ornac, nor were there any mountains or things of the like close by. The shepherds asked me why I was searching for the temple, to plunder it or awaken a demon seductress. I assured them all that we were trying to preserve their ancient past and safeguard any treasures there by placing them in the Naquerian Museum. One of the older shepherds mentioned there was a distant place 4 days to the northeast of Raklola, where a little oasis was. There were broken remains of an old settlement, but no one knows anything about it. Other shepherds knew the place and called it Isaptra. It was a place where they often took their sheep to graze. Collectively, they agreed without slow sheep, someone could probably reach it within 2 to 3 days. However, none of them saw any temple ruins there. I began to wonder if it had maybe been attacked and sacked by Shali Shababa, and no one knew about it. Then, one of the younger shepherds, perhaps 4 or 5 years older than I was, revealed that he had found a strange stone mural of a 4-armed woman against a small hill. Others confirmed it, and they admitted they had forgotten it had existed. It was a strange image indeed, and nearly all of the shepherds thought it was a mural to scare children into behaving. They didn't know it was connected to Tsakata until I showed them the art. I thanked them, but the shepherds made me promise not to disturb the oasis, as Isaptra, as they called it, was frequently used by the shepherds. I promised that it would not be disturbed. That night, I told everyone what I had discovered. To my surprise, no one else was able to find anything out. Hamal, Isco, and Dobasi volunteered to find this place. They will leave tomorrow. If this mysterious Isaptra is in fact Lorbesh, then we will be able to find out what secrets Tsakata has hidden there. Until they return, we will have to wait and savor all of the splendor of Raklola. September 13th, 513. Exciting news! Hamal, Isco, and Dobasi returned. They explained to us that the journey there took much longer, as they had to find where this mysterious sheep refuge was. Once they found it, it was easy enough to find their way back. Obasi described the stone mural the shepherds mentioned. He told us there was indeed a mural with an engraving of Tsakata on it. She had a pair of swords crossed over her stomach and her lower region, a third sword raised above her head and one pointing in a direction, while the sand and wind had worn down the mural, which probably had color painted on it. The image was still intact. Obasi had a hunch and followed the pointed sword until he came to a pair of flat-lying rocks on the ground. Obasi said there were grooves carved into the flat rock, and when they pulled them, they found a passage leading down. Obasi, Hamal, and Isco didn't go inside, but they carefully concealed the door back and then left the next day. We are all preparing to leave Raklola tomorrow in hopes to see this passage for ourselves. Could this actually be the legendary temple of Tsakata at Lorbesh? We are going to find out.